Shannon.
All right, let's bring in Marc, a fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, a columnist for the Washington Post, and a Fox News contributor. Marc, good to see you.
Good to see you.
All right, of all of those confirmation hearings we're going to be watching today, who do you think is going to get the toughest time in the hot seat?
I think they all are to some extent. I mean, look, I think if you watched last night with Betsy DeVos, how the Democrats went after her and basically ignored the subject of education, went after her about her wealth and her investments and whether she supported
climate change,
everything but education. I mean, they're using these hearings as theater for their base. I mean, look, the Democrats are powerless to stop any of these Trump nominees because in 2013 they got rid of the filibuster for presidential appointments. So that means they can be approved with just Republican votes. I'm sure a lot of these nominees are going to get Democratic votes, but the Democrats have, unless Elizabeth Warren can convince some Republicans to vote against Price over Obamacare, which is not likely to happen, they're not going to stop any of these people. So what they're doing is they're trying to put on a show for their base, but it's all as Shakespeare said, sound and fury signifying nothing.
Well, South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley is up for UN ambassador, and we've already talked last hour about some of the criticism that she's facing, that she doesn't have the right kind of foreign policy experience. Some Democratic senators are already speaking out publicly about that. We also have a sneak peek of some of what she'll say today, and she is also going to fire back. In talking about the UN, here's a couple of her quotes. We contribute 22% of the UN's budget, far more than any other country. We are a generous nation, but we must ask ourselves what good is being accomplished by this disproportionate contribution. Are we getting what we pay for? And on the issue of Israel, she says nowhere has the UN's failure been more consistent and more outrageous than in its bias against our close ally Israel. How do you think she'll do today?
She's 100% correct. She's a really smart lady, a successful governor. I think she's going to do a great job. And if Democrats go after her for a lack of experience, I mean, my gosh, did they criticize Barack Obama for his lack of foreign policy experience when he ran for commander-in-chief of the United States? I mean, she's running. There are governors who've been successful commanders-in-chiefs who have less foreign policy experience than her. So I think it's a ridiculous charge. The United Nations is not going to be central to Donald Trump's foreign policy. It's going to be I think she's going to do. I think she's going to do a great job. She's a perfect pick for it, and she's a great example of if people are saying Donald Trump is so divisive, he's not bringing the country together. She was one of his fiercest critics during the campaign. She supported Marco Rubio. He reached out to her and gave her an important position. This is an example of Donald Trump trying to bring the country together and the Republican Party together. And so I think it's a great pick, and she's going to do great.
Yeah, we saw just seconds ago in one of those quad boxes there, Dr. Tom Price, who is a Republican congressman from Georgia. He is also an orthopedic surgeon. He's also a huge critic of Obamacare, which seems to be the left's main objection to him. We have a bit of a preview of what he's going to talk about today, too, with regards to health care and potentially becoming the HHS secretary. He says he thinks health care is about affordability, accessibility, quality, choices, innovation, and responsiveness. He's going to get raked over the coals, though, because they're going to want to talk about what the heck Republicans are going to replace Obamacare with when they repeal it. I mean, he's actually done a lot of detailed work on this. Will they give him credit?
Absolutely. He's got a 242-page bill to replace Obamacare. Now, that's not necessarily going to be the Trump plan. I'm sure elements of it will be. Donald Trump is working on a plan to replace Obamacare, and so there's going to be a lot of discussion about that. But again, I think their Democrats are going to be less interested in talking about health care today and more interested about trying to take down Price, with accusations of insider trading, which is absolutely and patently ridiculous. I mean, the trades that they're referring to were a grand total of $300. If they want to talk about insider trading, John Kerry, when he was chairman of the Senate, with the Health Care Subcommittee of the Finance Committee in 2003, he was in charge of helping usher through a Medicare Part D, and he had 111 transactions in drug pharmaceutical companies that were going to benefit from Medicare Part D that earned him between $500,000 and $2 million. I don't recall Democrats raising that during his confirmation hearings as Secretary of State. So there's a ton of hypocrisy in the way the Democrats are going after these nominees.
All right, Scott Pruitt, the Oklahoma Attorney General, who has sued the EPA more than a dozen times now, up to head the EPA. This is one of those that I really, when this announcement came, I felt like inside of Trump Towers, they might have had a meeting and they're like, who would upset the environmentalist the most? Who could we possibly pick? Because he'd had this, the president-elected had this meeting with Al Gore, and so some people thought it was going to attack to the left on environmental. Then he rolls out Scott Pruitt. He had to know this was not going to go over well with Democrats.
Yeah, and look, I mean, George Will called him the Obama administration's greatest tormentor. I think that's absolutely correct. And the fact that he himself lists himself as a leading advocate against the APA's activist agenda on his website in the Oklahoma Attorney General's office. So I think he's the perfect person to lead the APA. He is a man who believes that environmental policy should be devolved to the state. So it's a perfect person to pick a state leader to do that. And the reality is the Obama administration has been using the EPA, abusing the regulatory powers of the EPA to impose a radical environmentalist agenda on the country that they can't get passed through Congress. When they couldn't pass cap and trade, they tried to ram it through by using the 1970 Clean Air Act, and Scott Pruitt sued them. And now he's going to be in a position as the head of the EPA to roll back those regulations and unleash American business again from under the neck of this regulatory burden.
Yeah, and we see him there as he's watching the opening remarks from the ranking Democrat, Senator Tom Carper, on that committee, who has made clear he thinks that Pruitt is the worst possible choice. So we'll see. As you said, the
That's
numbers
a good endorsement.
the numbers don't work well for the Democrats on these votes. So we'll wait and see. Marc Thiessen, always good to see you.